ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Grand Slam Journey podcast, where I, together with my guests, discuss various topics related to finding our passion and purpose, maximizing our potential, sports, life after sports, and transitioning from one chapter of our lives to the next, growing our skills in whatever we decide to put our minds into. My today's conversation is with Rikke Johansen. Rikke is originally from Denmark and came to US as a nanny. She fell in love with America and decided to pursue her career in becoming a doctor of chiropractic. That's how I met Rikke. A few years back, when I moved to the Bay Area, I was looking for someone to help me with some of my injuries. Rikke became more than a chiropractor to me. She became a dear friend and someone who I asked for an advice in various areas of health and fitness. Rikke has a remarkable athletic journey herself and has done many different sports from handball to powerlifting, bodybuilding, triathlons. During this podcast, we discussed just that. We discussed some of her athletic upbringing, her path to become a chiropractor, what to look for in finding the right doctor for you. And then we dive into general tips, areas of my interest, such as cold plunge, the benefits and protocols that Rikke follows, tips for rest and recovery. We talk about nutrition and various different things. This discussion may be helpful for anyone who wants to be entertained with fun stories and learn some tips on how to optimize our performance and continue to be active and move as we age through life. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you believe may enjoy it as well, and please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. I put a lot of time and effort into producing these podcasts, and so I would appreciate you investing a little bit of time and submitting a review if you enjoyed this episode. And now, enjoy the listen. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Super great to have you on my Grand Slam Journey podcast. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
I know we've been talking about this for quite a while. And as I've been reflecting actually on our recent get-together with our girls this weekend and thinking about our conversation today, I was like, how amazing it is that I have such a driven group of girlfriends. And when I listened to even your stories that you had shared this weekend, one thing that really struck me is your fearlessness. If I think about someone living their life to their full potential, exploring and playing and experimenting, that's what I feel like is you or some of the amazing stories I've heard. So hopefully we'll dive into some of those. But before we do, what do you want listeners to know about you?
Like most of your other guests, I'm also didn't grow up in the US. I grew up in Denmark, but left fairly early on after high school to be a nanny in the US. Fell in love with sunshine and blue sky. Went back to Denmark, did a couple of years of med school as pre-chiropractic to come back to college in the US, and came back here to go to college, and ended up getting married, getting a green card, and stayed. So
never went back to Denmark.
Never did, probably never will. I like it here. I like the outdoors. And it was always my dream to work with athletes, to be able to think a little bit outside of the box. I never really knew what chiropractic was going to bring for me. You are very limited as a chiropractor, and continuing education is always going to be something that give you more tools to work with athletes.
And that's another thing you do fantastically. You do so many extra curriculum activities other than chiropractor that translates to your own personal development. And it seems like you're generally a very curious person. And so there's so many new things you're always trying and exploring and experimenting.
Yeah, I recently hosted 15, 16 young students from my alma mater, from Palmer College of Chiropractic. And it was great to see these young fresh souls come in and they want to learn, they want to see what it's like. And it's very different because I am very different. I realize than most chiropractors in that I spend a lot of time with my patients. I probably charge a lot more than the average chiropractor. And it's just a different practice I have. With the continuing education, I have a lot of extra tools that I can use. And I opted a long time ago not to take all the HMO insurances that would then control my practice so I could continue to do chiropractic the way I want to actually use my education as a clinician, not just a technician.
And obviously you have big clientele and people who love what you do. And I often think price comes with quality. So you definitely get what you pay for.
Like I explained to these young people, like you start in the beginning, you will take anything that walks in the door. Then when you become an old fart 30 years into chiropractic, then it's like, I don't want to go down my list of patients and go, oh, that person is coming in. So you pick your patients and, it's better for the patient anyway that you actually enjoy being with them and taking care of them. So
yes.
It's a personal interest for both parties. So.
Yeah. And I would say maybe I'm biased, but I've looked at it this way, especially with chiropractors. Or probably any doctor for that matter, but I feel chiropractor specifically, personally, because I've done a lot of chiropractors in the past, and there's some procedures or kind of the way you adjust. If you don't have the right chiropractic expertise, people can get really injured. So that was the one thing that I always do extra due diligence. And I've done so much research before I ended up with you.
Yeah.
And you were recommended by everyone. I was like, okay, Rikke is it. There's probably a lot of people that haven't had as much chiropractor adjustments or experience. What would you recommend them to look at?
I wrote a whole chapter on that I would give to my patients when they move somewhere else, what to look for in a chiropractor or 10 reasons why you should fire your chiropractor. And a lot of my colleagues may not approve of my way of speaking out about that, but we're all different. One of my patients found me from simply saying, I'm going to find a chiropractor that has degrees of continuing education. And I'm not an athlete, but I want a sports chiropractic because this particular patient learned that you have to do a lot more continuing education. So that makes sense to me. I'm like, well, that's a good way of thinking. There's a job fair going on at my college this month, and I looked at the participants. And lo and behold, my profession has turned into all these franchises. And these are clinics that are franchises. I'm not going to mention any of the names, but when you look at the staff, they have more marketing personnel than they do have chiropractors. That should scare you a little bit, in my opinion. But those are the chiropractic places where you get a technician or a very young doctor that's learning. And, I also tell the young doctors, if you're not sure what you want to do, go work for one of those places. Get your hands and get a lot of practice because you may see 100 people a day or 50 a day. I don't even see that a week. So very different, right? But if you're only seeing a patient for a couple of minutes, it's a different story. You can do the chiropractic adjustment, but what are you then? You're a technician. You're not using your skills, true skills. I lost my train of thought, but hey, sorry about that.
No, that was perfect. It wasn't lost at all. I just want to go back a little bit to your athletic experience because you have done so many different sports. So maybe if you can just go through all of your progression because you transitioned from one sport to another. Yeah. And then how do you see that expertise and knowing how to move and drive and perform as an athlete translate to the chiropractic care and what you do now?
I was a handball player, and most Americans don't know what that is, but team handball is actually an Olympic sport. US actually they got a handball team here. It's like soccer with the hands. But I got injured as a young teenager, and before Title IX or whatever that we're called in Denmark, we just didn't take care of young ladies when we got hurt. Not a lot was expected. So a completely ligament deficient knee was not something we took care of back then. So I got into, in the 80s, weightlifting after I couldn't do the team sports anymore. And, then I took that to as far as I could and got strong in the weight room. And then I moved to the US and then eventually got a bicycle, started racing bicycles. And then I learned to swim and started doing triathlons. But, always stuck with the weightlifting. So
I do want to touch on that because doing weightlifting in the 80s, that's still not very typical. I remember even back in the day, everybody can look up. It's public, my information or birthday, right? I was born 1985. And even then in Czech Republic, like when you're growing up, and especially even in tennis, we don't really lift much. Like the lifting we had with tennis, it's kind of pathetic. It's not really lifting. It's like, more a rehab, a little bit of weight for shoulder and a little bit of legs. And it's more for building some sort of perhaps flexibility than a real strength. How was that time in the 80s, being a woman, going to a gym, lifting?
For me, it was okay. We know a little bit about it. It was the Jane Fonda, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all that kind of stuff that became the thing we were looking at. And then the gym opened, and I wanted to get in shape because I got a little fat.
You and fat, I can't imagine. Was it extra 5 pounds?
It wasn't fat. It was just like, not an athlete anymore, not running and doing all the things I used to do. So I said, I'm going to start at the gym. So I got into the gym. I started, all covered up, started, lifting weights. And suddenly I was quite muscular. I was one of very few women that did it back then. And it was in Denmark. It was all about lifting weights, taking a break, smoking a cigarette, finish up your squat sets, go back in, have a coffee and another cigarette, finishing up, and then go to the tanning bed to get tan, right? Because, we didn't know so much back then. But then I moved to the US. Well, I came over here to be a nanny. And oh my goodness, it was like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was California. It was Muscle Beach. It was like everything. All the women were lifting weights. I actually started competing while I was here as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. Right?
And there was bodybuilding, was it? Or powerlifting?
It was powerlifting and bodybuilding. Yeah, powerlifting. I mean, we were close to Russia. So all the boys in my gym were all doing steroids. They would get it from the Eastern Bloc and do whatever they do. I saw it all happening around me. And because that's what they did. Even the young teenagers who don't need steroids or, anything at all. But it was very interesting to see that. It was so awful, but we know a lot more about it now. And then, after coming back to Denmark, I actually competed in Denmark as well. And I remember standing there in the showers that were co-ed. I was a junior national championship, and I saw all the seniors, all the senior women. And I'm like, it's time to go back to school. And that's when I said, I'm not going to take this bodybuilding thing any further. No. I'm going to go back to school. But I also always kept lifting.
And when you saw the women, was it just a natural? You could tell that they were progressing with the strength?
No, it was very obvious that they were doing steroids. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. Let's leave it at that. And I'm like, whoa, I only read about that. I actually see it with my own 2 eyes now. So it was very interesting. Yeah. But back then they all knew they were doing it, and it was not really my thing ever. So, but weightlifting became part of my life because that's how I was able to function with a bad knee. So, and then coming to California and getting a bicycle and finding a new sport to attack, it was amazing. So, but it also taught me a lot about what it's like as a young person to be injured, something that will change your path. Because I probably would have never ended up in the US if it wasn't for my messed up knee. I would have probably been married with kids and a house and a dog like my brother, probably coaching handball. Who knows? And probably been an engineer, not a chiropractor.
Yeah.
But things change. You start looking at things and like, that doesn't make sense, that I should just stop playing sports. And now, within these last 40 years, we now have something called sports medicine. We didn't back then. And now we have sports medicine, pediatric, geriatric sports medicine. We just know so much more about how important movement is and how that is life. Movement is life. And if we stop moving, it's all over.
Yeah.
So even as we get older, we got to find a way to keep moving. We may have to change things around, but got to keep moving. And that is my job, helping people move.
Yeah. So stay active. What is your favorite sport now? Do you have a favorite one?
I still like throwing big weights around, but I probably the best meditation is my bicycle. I learned something today, a new trick. When you go to the gym nowadays, so as to not have your internal monologue take people apart while you're working out and focus, I put on my reading glasses when I go to the gym. That way I can see my watch and I can't see all the people around me. It's perfect. So I wear reading glasses. I can't see what's going on around me, but I can in my own little world.
That's an interesting trick.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned, bike. There's something when I get on, usually it's, the Airdyne that I have in a garage, or I sit on a rower and I row for 25 or 30 minutes. And these workouts are okay, but I always have internal monologue. So they serve a purpose for me to get clear about some of the things that happen during the day, but they don't completely shift me from the work day. So there's something that I've realized going back to tennis, because you require so much of focus and the hand-eye coordination and the instant timing of the ball, to where I actually feel more rested after tennis, because that makes me turn off my head. Do you have a trick for that on the bike? I'm wondering, maybe I'm just not doing it well.
20 minutes is not enough.
Yeah. You need to go for like 2 hours.
I used to go climb a hill. And when you're about 45 minutes into it, that's when everything becomes clear. And you get your best ideas. You solve all the big problems in the world. It comes clear to you. And you could essentially run for president if I had been born here. Or not.
I love it. And so if you look back on your past, was handball your favorite?
Well, that's so long ago, and that's a painful thing now because I couldn't do it. The last couple of times I played, I dislocated my knee. But I got into endurance sports, and that became like my place of solitude and place of my favorite introversion. But triathlon was also great for me, training for something and just being out there on your own, going forward, not setting any records, but just going out there and pushing your own limits.
Yeah.
But I think as you speak with any endurance athlete, when you go out there and first you burn up all your glycogen, then you start like burning into your extra storage, and then you got a fueling, and then you have to rely on the next level and the next level of mental strength. It's cool, but that gets a point for me. I'm too old for it now because I'm a little worn out. So we keep it a little shorter.
So how did you then decide from all your athletic endeavor to pursue chiropractic education and become a chiropractor? Was that process and path for you?
It started with my dad back in the 70s, having a pneumonia. I come from an engineering and accounting family. So chiropractors were quacks, right, in my family. But when my father finally needed to do something about his bad back, he was taken to a chiropractor that fixed him, and he was back playing soccer again and all that. And then when my back became a problem, they took me to the chiropractor, and that worked. So that became part of like maybe once or twice a year, you'd go to the chiropractor. And right before I went to the US to be a nanny, I went to see my chiropractor, and I saw this little pamphlet that said, you too can become a chiropractor. And that kind of stuck in the back of my head. So as the young, smart-ass teenager in the US, okay, now how about I just stay here and I'll just ask my parents to send me some money. And then I'll just stay here in California and go to school, become a chiropractor because I can. And my parents, of course, say, no, we're not going to send you money when you live in Denmark, where education is free. So I went back to Denmark and then used 2 years in med school in Odense with the medical students to do it. But I decided not go into engineering because I wanted to work with people. Not that I have great people skills. I fake it all the time. I kind of don't like people. I fake it all the time, but I love my patients, right? I actually love going to work every day, even after 30 years. But how did I decide on chiropractic? I mean, it became, even back then when I wrote my application to get into college over here, it became definitely sports chiropractic back in late 80s when we didn't even have sports medicine. But I described how I was going to have weights. I was going to have a small gym in my office. I was going to work with athletes. And that's kind of what I got. I mean, I'm downsized now to just me, but that's what I had all along.
Yeah. That's actually interesting that you imagine that at that point, like late 80s, and that's literally what you created. I mean, when I come to your office, you have your weights, your kettlebells, you have some other things for exercising. Would you think that you've pretty much created it? This goes a little bit more to the mindset. Like, what do you think about you attract and you create? Do you think that thought at that point sort of manifested because you put the active energy and effort into it?
I guess. I think my primary motivation back then was that I wanted to get the hell out of Denmark. So I'm like, how the hell do I get out of Denmark and get an education at the same time? So that's what I think it was. And kudos to my parents for saying, okay, we will sign on that loan you're going to take to actually go to a different country and have to pay for an education that would be free in Denmark. I mean, I could have stayed in Denmark and gotten my medical degree, but no. So my parents were pretty cool about that. But yeah, but it did. When I go back and read that essay, I wrote out that I wanted to have this and that. So yeah, I kind of created it. It's funny you ask, because I never really thought about that, but that's kind of what I ended up with. I also tend to treat people treat as in chiropractic treatment and clinician duties. I treat the way I would want to be treated. So whenever I go to a doctor, I would expect them to have looked at my chart before I come in. I would expect them to actually, spend a little time going over their notes before I come in. So they actually know who I am and know what my problems are.
Yeah, I love that about you too.
And I actually do have a doctor. I have a doctor like that. And she's awesome. So
I bet that makes it hard to sometimes find the right doctor, you knowing all the effort and things that it takes. Finding somebody that does the same, they can be for sure a challenge. And one thing I do want to mention that I also love about your practice is how everything is digital. So there was another thing that pulled me in, because I hate texting or emailing with people and making calls to get scheduled. I was like, just give me a website and I schedule when I need to and it's done. And so you were the first, I believe, doctor that I went online. I actually filled out everything online. And you didn't ask me for any additional papers when I came. Because most of the time, even when you put in all the work and you fill it out, you come to an office, doctor office, and they make you fill out these papers. I already did this whole work online. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. If a doctor does that to me, I walk out right there from now. I mean, it's happened to me too. And that is absolutely, yeah. So, I've worked with younger doctors that were not that into it. They want to control their schedule. Oh no, don't let anyone just make their own appointments. I'm like, why not? These are my hours. If there's an opening, go ahead and schedule. And then you fill it out online, because then I don't have to read it and then fill it into the computer and then shred the paper. And so much easier that way, and it can be done. This was another thing I wanted to show the younger doctors. I'm like, it can be done. I don't have an assistant anymore. I manage everything online. I do my own billing and everything. So it can be done. It is probably more work than most young doctors want to do, and they're scared of it, and they shouldn't be. So yeah, if there are any chiropractors listening, young chiropractors, I would love to find a hardworking young chiropractor that I could hand it over to one day and then teach them how it can be done if you're organized. And use the artificial intelligence that's out there and the digital world.
Yeah, that has continued to grow for sure.
Yeah.
But I would think the most difficult part is probably just setting it up, right? Getting the processes and kind of the digitalization of it. But once you invest in that initial time, it pretty much carries over and you're set up for the rest of the process, right? And it saves time over the duration. It just pays for itself probably with not needing to respond to text messages and emails of people.
Yep. I think my patients will tell patients they refer, make sure you fill out your paperwork before you come in. Otherwise, she's not going to be happy.
I love it. This could be, I'm sure there's other people than athletes who are wired this way. But this is what I wonder and kind of reflect, being an athlete and doing many different sports. I feel like one of the things that it trained us is the understanding of time and prioritization and efficiency and effectiveness. Because you need to squeeze so many more things into a day, and you always time managing from early on. It's really bred into you because you're shuffling so many different things. Schools, sports, even just that early on, and many more as you grow through life. Do you think that is one of the things that stuck with you? It seems like you really run your practice that way and treasure your time and efficiency and effectiveness. You transfer it over.
Absolutely. I mean, and most athletes that have managed the schedule of both school, work, and athleticism, they already understand and they're used to it. And you can't make someone want that. So I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is actually, it's funny thing because it can be positive, but on the other side, I also struggle with it because when you come to an environment or people who don't value that, it just can drive us crazy.
Yeah.
Going back to chiropractor, what do you look at when somebody walks into your door? What's kind of some of the first things you want to analyze? And maybe share a little bit, how do you approach things?
First of all, I always look at people, not just in my office. I look at people when I'm having tea. I look at people on the beach. I look at people at the mall. You're analyzing all the time. That's what happens. You can't help it. Oh, yeah, that person definitely will need a new hip within the next 5 to 10 years. That person has no range of motion in their right ankle. Oh, that person definitely. Now, before I get sidetracked, I was invited by one of my Olympic athletes to a homecoming in Colorado right before COVID hit. And I got to sit back and look at all these people that came from all different sports. It was just great to sit and see the differences and in all the different body types. But when people come into my office, obviously, I have already reviewed their records. So I know what they're there for. I know their background. There's a big difference in what you do to a 17-year-old and an 80-year-old and their pre-existing conditions, right? But typically to a chiropractor, someone comes in with a musculoskeletal problem, pain, a joint problem, but I always look at the way they move, right? I have my idea about, and then, their general mannerisms, and they don't know they're being judged already, whether they're going to be my patient or not, but no, I'm just kidding. But they come in and then we go through what any doctor would do. And it's not what all chiropractors do, although we have the skills to do it. But you go through their past medical history, their vitals and everything. And then we go into the movement patterns.
Yeah.
From ankle range of motion to the squat movement to overhead movement to see how they generally move. And from that, you extrapolate what you're going to look more specifically at and come up with a plan. So,
yeah, we have to make a date and go. The best place that comes into mind, Santana Row. We're going to grab a coffee and sit there. And I want to hear all the commentary because it's interesting. I have that to some degree too. So I wonder if it's like the athletic mindset, you kind of look at people and I probably don't see it. And not probably, for sure don't see it from that angle. But when I look at somebody who runs, I judge runners a lot. So I wonder if this is something, the efficiency and effectiveness and how much it is part of any sport. Like if you want to be great, you need to know how to move effectively to achieve the goal, whatever sport it is, right? Because that will help you exert less power or keep the energy for longer, right?
Yeah, you're creating a body where you have less resistance to your kinetic chain. We go into a sport. I just had one of my Olympic swimmers that just left. Do I want that person to run? No, they're not good runners because they're like flopsy and this and that, right? And then you see a lot of elite tennis player are a slight bit bow-legged because that creates an incredibly stable base where they're not going to sprain things. So we see people go into sports where they don't get injured and things they're good at, right? We're going to gravitate toward things we're good at and where we don't get injured, so we don't break down. So you see funny patterns in where we end up. Like if you're incredibly flexible, you gymnastics, stuff like that. And if you had different positioning of your different bones are structured in a different way, you're going to end up in sports where you're good and where you're not injured.
Yeah. And the second thing I wanted to comment, you mentioned the word judgment. And I think it sometimes, or especially nowadays, comes with typically a negative connotation. But I actually think it's really positive. And especially for you, like chiropractor, you need to apply judgment to create the right care. I think that's really part of it and part of the right care.
Yeah, it's what it's all about. It's how it all works together. And it sounds kind of lame, but that is what we do. I had a great discussion last night with a bunch of doctors that also do the extracorporeal shockwave treatment, which is a phenomenal way. It's big in Europe. We're so far behind in the US. But I've been sending people out for this treatment for the past 2 decades probably. And now I have the equipment myself. And now I have I sat here last night and talked to, probably 10, 15 other doctors that are from all over the country, from PTs, orthos, the doctors that are doing injections and PRP, stem cell, that kind of stuff. There was a veterinarian there that also does the shockwave. So a lot of different perspectives as to how we use that. There was something that really stuck with me. It was a doctor last night. So he sounded like an orthopedic surgeon, but he's actually a chiropractor / naturopath. And he does injections all day under ultrasound, and he does Shockwave. And I love the way he was describing how he pick and chooses his patients, because that's what I do. If you come here to me and expect me to fix you, if your BMI is over 30 and your A1C is up over 8, basic metabolic syndrome, that's everyone else's fault, I'm probably not the right doctor for you, because I'm going to fail if I start working on you, because you are not going to heal, because you're not letting your body heal. So you go talk to a nutritionist, go back to your doctor, lose some weight, take the load off, and take care of yourself. I'm not going to pick patients. I'm not going to get better. And I don't really want to handhold someone that needs something so much bigger than me. So you get to pick and choose a little bit. I'm totally off track again here, but hey.
No, you're not. That totally connects. But there's also drives on the efficiency and effectiveness and valuing your time, because you only have that much time in the day to help the people that really need to be helped. And it's just so understandable, because you come from that athletic background. You obviously want to help athletes and people who want to continue to be active to move better. That seems to be really the mission and the core of who you are as a human.
Yeah.
I mean, we should prioritize what we want to invest our time and energy into, especially even like a job.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, to give an example, when early on in my career, I was always studying something, and I had a lot of my colleagues that were kind of like, why are you wasting your time doing that? You're not going to make more money. No, but I want to know more. I would get bored. So I became what we call a qualified medical evaluator for workers' compensation cases. And English is my third language, right? So, writing, I hate it. You probably know what I'm talking about. So you would evaluate workers' compensation, meaning people that are hurt at work. And then I ran into something I didn't know. You actually run into people that don't want to get better. I'm like, what? To me, that was like, whoa. But there are people that don't want to get better. They just want a payment and a diagnosis, and then they want to be felt sorry for.
Wow.
Right. And I cannot connect with people like that.
No.
To your point, right? I'm also in an area here where I generally have people that are motivated, intelligent, and know what they want.
Yeah.
So.
And you're certainly stimulating, which is why we're here and talking about things. Because every time I come to you, we talk about all the fun things I study or I'm curious about, like food, nutrition, recovery, maximizing human potential on all fronts.
You talked earlier about all the crazy stuff I do. I'm like, wait a second. Wasn't it you that dragged me up Half Dome?
That was so fun.
No, it wasn't. I'm scared of heights.
And you still did it. And with your knee, it was impressive. And it was so fun. Just something about struggling together, trying to get up of a mountain as a group.
Yeah. You were not struggling, young lady. You were doing loops around us.
Oh, thanks. I felt good, I think, at that point. It's actually weirdly, the up the hill is not the hard part for me. The worst part is when you start going down. And about like halfway down, like the knees and ankles and the hips that start like really hurting from the downhill. That's actually the hardest part to get over. So I think my pain wasn't on the up the hill session. It was usually the last 3 miles or so.
Also, you've been out there all day, right? So it was great because I spent a lot of the day like just hiking by myself. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Thinking about ways to decompress and think about different things.
Yeah.
But I do want to go back a little bit to what you mentioned, and I forget how it's called, the new treatment for the deep tissue, because I remember you coming over to even our house for dinner and talking about it. And I can sense how excited you were and how curious you were about it. So a lot of people probably don't know what it is. So maybe if you can a little bit describe it deeper and what makes you so enthusiastic and curious about it now.
In the sports medicine world, I started hearing about it probably almost 20 years ago. Piezo wave is an acoustic wave that is focused into a very specific point. You can control the depth at where you are applying the therapy, but it was also being used for lithotripsy, which is breaking up kidney stones. So it's a very specific way of basically creating damage in the tissues to speed up the healing process in the body. But I heard about it a long time ago, and I had some patients that were having problems with plantar fascia. And I found a doctor over in the East Bay from here And back then they were doing it under anesthesia. And it was like, when people couldn't handle some of the very deep tissue techniques I use, such as the Graston technique, which is instrument assisted soft tissue work, I would send them over there. And I've been in the OR when they would put people under and then put this Shockwave sound, not a shock, it's called Shockwave, but it's really a very controlled acoustic wave that is changing things down at the cellular level. So they would have that done and it would work. And then later on, a lot of the other doctors started having machines that would be go into the office. You could do it without anesthesia. You can control the intensity and get patient feedback. So in Europe, it's huge. And I finally last year, decided to add that as a tool to my practice. So it's just great to have one more thing you can do. It's a way to work on tendinopathies like tennis elbow, plantar fascia, hip bursitis. It is amazing for healing stress fractures in feet. But, we get athletes back to performance after a stress fracture a month faster, wow. 4 weeks earlier. So it's huge in that community of runners and on-feet athletes. So it's a great thing. Whenever there's someone asks, would it help that? Well, let me go on PubMed and find out. And then you find all the research and treatment protocols. It's all there. And then a great community here that's being created by people that are promoting it. It's exciting. It's another tool to have in my little bag.
Yeah. How many sessions do you think a person typically needs to have? Is there like a recommendation or does it depend on what you're treating and how bad it is?
There are protocols, right? In my world of chiropractic, there are the chiropractors like me who say most things should be better in 3 to 6 visits, right? And that's kind of how it goes if you're going to get better. And then there are the chiropractors that think you should be coming in all the time. And I don't understand how anyone had time for that. So 3 to 6 visits, sometimes it is 6 to 12 visits. Some of the acute injuries, you feel better after one. But the chronic stuff, you go in there and 1 to 2 weeks into treatment, you start, new vascular tissue is developing so you're speeding up healing, stem cell overturn, and basically increase in the healing. So it's just a tool. I do the same thing with the manual therapy and the instrument assisted stuff, but the Pisa wave goes where my fingers and my instruments can't go to a specific depth. I also use ultrasound to find out exactly where is the tissue I need to get to so I can measure diagnostic ultrasound. So I can really be specific about the treatment. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? What comes to your mind is the advancement of science that has happened.
If only we had that when I was an athlete. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you ever wonder, because you're really on the edge trying to deploy all the new things and you're so into learning and development and exploring and studying pretty much all the things from diet, fasting, cold plunge, and the tips to improve performance. Do you ever wonder what athlete you could be if you only had the same amount of wisdom and care back in the day?
Looking at myself, I could have been mediocre. That's about it. It's amazing when you go out and play or train with someone that's truly talented and genetically talented, right? I used to go riding with a professional cyclist. It was fine during the off season. And then came spring and she would turn on what I jokingly would say, she turned on this gene that I just did not have. I could be a good all-around athlete, but I don't have what it would take to go all in to something. It's just, probably stronger than most.
Yeah.
But it would have been great to have the right care for my knee back when I was a teenager. Because nowadays they will go in and repair the ligaments, right? Back then they didn't.
Yeah.
So, but hey, you can't go back in the past. You can only look forward, right?
Yeah. What other things do we want to dive into, Rikke? I have phlebotomy. That's another thing that you went and study.
I'm also an EMT. I'm not an active EMT, meaning I don't ride around on ambulances, but I maintain my EMT credentials, emergency medical technician. And that's probably one of the hardest things to maintain because it's a lot of hours. But then it's more for volunteer work. It came in very handy during the beginning of COVID because with an EMT, they would let me go in and do volunteer work, like take out trash and stuff at the hospitals that were busy. And phlebotomy is another thing I did because there was a shortage. I was bored during COVID, basically. So I was able to become a phlebotomist. So I teach it every now and then.
I should describe, what does phlebotomy mean for people?
Phlebotomy is blood drawing, venipuncture. So needles.
So you just decided, well, I have extra time on my hands. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And that's what you came up with.
Yeah.
I love it.
There was a shortage, so you never know, right? It's good to have options.
Yeah.
Like I always say to the young kids, keep improving your skills. And the more skills you have, when you start, it's almost like it's all fits together. Like studying the thyroid, phlebotomy, you study the tests you do. And as a doctor, you understand the problems you have with it. So it all starts mixing in together and everything gets easier.
Yeah. It sounds like learning languages, because you mentioned, what was your second language?
German.
So English third.
But
sometimes it seems like the more languages you speak, the easier it is to pick up the next one or understand context of different cultures.
Absolutely.
Because if you understand the structure of the language, there's understanding a little bit of how the culture communicates and works and what's is and isn't acceptable, right? So it seems like in the medical field, or all knowledge for that matter, it's additive. And even different things that you look at, then it all adds up together. Yeah. If you do things that you're genuinely curious and passionate about, there will some way in the future all add up to create an next path.
You know, when you come right out of school, any doctor, I mean, it's all about learning. I mean, the more experienced you are, the more your brain is connecting dots. You don't have that as a young doctor. So you learn in school, you learn algorithms, you learn to examine, evaluate, moving step forward. You have a pathway you follow. The more experience you get, the easier it gets, right?
What else do you want to dive into? Cold plunging? I know you do that now regularly, and you've done a lot of your own personal reading and research on it. You have a practice on cold plunging. Would you recommend it to general people or even athletes? And what is your protocol?
It all started in 2021. I was out hiking with a backpack for the first time. I was in over my head. And the only thing that saved me every night was jumping in the river and just cooling down. It was still COVID, so we had all this extra time on hand. So I started reading the Wim Hof stuff and the research about it. And it just feels so good when you get into a cold plunge, like at the spa or something like that. And then I said, okay, I'm going to see if there's a way I can afford one. So I got one. And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to send it to coldest temperature. And then why not, right? I'm going to get to that anyway. So, you kind of build your way up to it. But what strikes you the most is that, okay, so you feel good when your body's worn out and everything's hurting. But it is the change in your neurotransmitters. Your mood elevates, your focus dials in, and it works every single morning. It's amazing. So that and some stretching and a little hot tubbing is part of the morning ritual.
Do you have a hot tub too then? So do you go from the cold plunge to warm up to a hot tub for a while?
Yeah. Then you talk to people, and I spurred out some profanities when you talked about, oh, what about the thing that you go in the cold plunge and then you can't build muscle? I'm like, my point to you was, okay, I mean, there may be some points to that, but unless you're really going for Mr. or Mrs. Olympia and you're trying to build mass and stuff like that, we have so much research going on in that realm right now. So you kind of find what works for you. Some colleagues of mine just got their own cold plunge and they're working their way up in the minutes of cold plunging. And there's so much good stuff that comes out of it all the time. Just read what Huberman has to say about it.
Yes, I've listened to a number of his podcasts about how to use heat and cooling. And how many minutes did you start at and where are you at now?
We know that the maximum benefits comes around 2 minutes. I worked my way up to that. And I remember the first time I did 4 minutes, I got out and went like, I don't feel so good. That was too much. Okay. But now I can easily sit there for 8 minutes in 39-degree water, but I do a little setting that's on Garmin for breathing. It's 5 minutes and 34 seconds. That's my go-to every morning. And then I extend it if I feel like it. And then some days I can feel my heart rate really come down. And it's just interesting how stress and your sleep levels will affect your heart rate through a session. During the summer, when I'm typically a little leaner than I am right now, it's no easier, no harder. So it's really all about your mindset and how you control your mind. Yeah. It was very interesting on these very cold mornings when it's frosty and it's crispy, because I just get up in the morning and hose myself down with a garden hose. That's also very cold in the morning.
Yes.
And then you just say, no, it's just what I'm going to do.
You make a decision.
And this is not my line. Someone said that online. I heard somewhere. I'm like, no, I'm going to cold plunge because I'm looking at my calendar right here. And you know what? Weakness is not on my schedule today. So you just go do it. Yeah. It's just not on my schedule. So I'm just going to go do it. And it's 5 minutes. Anyone can do that, right? Yeah. So all the motivation. And I have to tell you, I don't like to be too hot or too cold ever. But cold plunging it's what I do. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do that extra set or I'm going to run that extra mile. It's just what I do.
What do you have it set at now? What's your temperature?
39 degrees Fahrenheit. It's 4.4 degrees Celsius.
Okay. And this is internal joke. Many people may not understand. Do you wear socks when you go in?
No, I don't. You should see what's up above my cold plunge. It says cereal chiller.
I love it.
And then next to it says get naked.
I may need to go get a test drive. I want to try it before I go and order mine. I was actually doing the cold showers in the morning for a while. But what I realized, it gotten so much easier day after day. I don't think I was getting enough shock to where I felt like I was struggling.
It's not about a shock because you can control that with your mind as well. If anyone saw me do this right now, they're going to think I'm doing this in lukewarm water. And I do it every morning. It's like even on the frosty mornings when hail is coming down, I am sitting down and like it is all mind control. And that is, to me, so fascinating. Me, I don't like being cold, but I can cold plunge. I walk around naked in my backyard there in the morning, and it's a mind exercise more than anything. And then the benefits of it, because you're reaping an amazing benefit of just feeling great. Focus, elevated mood. It is fascinating.
I look forward to testing it out.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing that comes top of mind, diet. I guess the one thing to intro it a little bit more is you and I often talked about keto diet or paleo diet, fasting. You do intermittent fasting. And there's been quite a bit also the counter argument, especially for women, that keto is more tested for men, like the fasting is more validated on the male bodies, like it's not as good perhaps for women. And so you're like the one woman I really resonated with and agree. And I feel like we have that mindset, eat protein first. How do you look at diet? What would you recommend for athletes or maybe general population? How do you look at it differently?
I've done it all. I was vegetarian vegan for 28 years. Until one day I was driving home from work and I'm like, I want a steak. And I was doing bodybuilding as a vegan. I mean, you can do a lot when you're younger. And if you know what diet is supposed to contain, if you know your macronutrients, most people don't. Reel me in if I lose my train of thought, because I have a lot of things to say about it, although I'm not an expert in any way, right? But I've done it all. I've tried it all. Yes. I can go keto, and it's great because now you don't have all the carbs that make you puffy. And it's great because you always feel full and you never have that hunger and you can control your blood sugar. Same with intermittent fasting. But coming from being a vegan into eating some meat again, I don't eat a lot. And when I eat it, it's good stuff. When people say, oh, well, I'm gluten intolerant. Yes. Well, then just eat vegetables and meat. Don't eat processed food. It's not that hard. I have family members, and I hope they never see this because, I mean, they're idiotic in the way they eat, right? They stuff themselves with sugar, but it's gluten-free. I'm like, okay. You want me to tell you why you're getting fat? Okay. And then I have all the girlfriends that are my age, past menopause, and complaining about how they can't lose weight because it's menopause. No, it's that you're eating shit and you are not building muscle. You're losing muscle. Muscle is the major organ that will burn fat and maintain your metabolism, right? And it's also what will help you control your insulin. So you're not getting all these problems. So probably don't ever post that anyway, what I just said right there, because people will be kind of, but intermittent fasting is great. After COVID, I'm like, well, I'm just going to work through lunch. I'll eat from 2 to 7. That's it. And it's so freaking easy, right? Yeah. We're not wasting all this time eating. I feel incredibly sharp when I do that. Beginning of last year, I decided to see if I could gain 10 pounds of muscle. And by lifting weights, consistently writing out the program, it took me about 8 months to gain 10 pounds of muscle. And that is coming from a DEXA scan, right? And to do that, you have to eat consistently. You have to fuel your body so it will build muscle. And I did. And it was weird eating every 2 hours again, like I haven't done. And I gained weight in the beginning, and then you create an engine that can burn the fat. It was very interesting as a 56-year-old woman to do that. And yeah, it can be done. Check.
What did your diet look like then? Did you carb up more?
Not too much more, but more. Yeah, you got to get the energy so you actually feel like working out twice a day. Like one of my favorite breakfasts right now is breakfast taco with an almond tortilla and eggs and spinach and bell pepper and avocado. It's just so good. I still love getting that every morning. And then I don't like to eat a big lunch because I'm working, bending over people all day long and lifting. And then a relatively good dinner with just good protein and good colorful things. Often, if someone really wants to do a little change, the Mediterranean diet is kind of good for a lot of people. It'll get them away from processed food. And it's not my favorite personally, but I can eat it. I know you guys used to be all fat and protein.
Yeah, we did strict keto, even with the keto mojo measuring.
Yeah.
Which Trevor is way better in getting into ketosis. I've actually never figured out like my optimal percentage because it takes a while and everybody's slightly different with the fat versus protein and how much of that you need to eat in different variances to really maximize your ketosis and get to like a high level of ketones. This is what I've kind of discovered for being an average human, which what I rate myself now because I really don't have time to work out every day. I mean, I work out every day, but I don't work out like 4-6 hours like I did, right? So my workouts are focused on effectiveness and efficiency between 20 to 40 minutes, probably max, depending how tired I am and how I feel. And then most of it is being by my computer, standing, sitting down. And so for that, I actually think I do very well on keto. So I think keto is really good for average exhaustion anywhere. So I use my Apple Watch. So I kind of look at when I'm burning between 500, that is on the minimum, that I don't do anything free day, to about 1,000 calories, smooth calories. That's where I'm optimal on keto. When I start adding more, let's say like tennis and like exhaustion and long matches, where I burn somewhere in the range of like 2,000, I naturally start craving more carbs. Like I need a little bit of ice cream or a pasta after my match, or my body just starts craving these. So I've actually allowed myself to recover. Otherwise, feel very, I think more than anything, the body would be okay, but moody and just worn out. So that's what I'm craving to refuel.
There's a fine line there too. I mean, going into ketosis is not the optimal way for the body to work. Although there's research out there that people say, oh, it's the only way. I'm like, no, it's really not. Humans are omnivores. And we're all going to find what works better for us, right? Yeah. I had a bodybuilder the other day that came from being like this big puffy guy to suddenly toning down with a program from his coach on how to get lean, right? And it was amazing, the transformation. He looked from being like a round puffy guy to a ripped athlete, right? And now he never, ever wants to be that fat again. So he's like keeping it. And he's learned that whatever my coach is telling me as far as carbs, I eat half of that because otherwise I get puffy. So we all need to find out what works for us. We all know that sugar becomes an addiction. Yes. Whenever I cut out carbs, I'm craving sourdough bread and brown rice. I don't know why that is, but that's sugar, right? Yeah. So the body doesn't care if it's a Coca-Cola or green drink. It's sugar.
Yeah. Right? And while we edit, I just wanted to add, I think one of the biggest reasons why I like keto or the intermittent fasting, because as you mentioned, I'm not really ever hungry or like the normal hunger, how my colleagues. Yeah. And so given I work on different time zones and my schedule is driven by different meetings, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm starving and I can't focus now and I have a brain fog because I need to have my lunch at noon. I never get to that phase. So I just like the more of like protein-based diet. It helps me with clarity and not being food dependent.
Sugar
and
dependent.
There's some sort of like freedom. Oh, if I don't eat for another 2-3 hours, I'll be okay.
Yeah,
like it's
fine.
not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. My friends that came over to try out my cold plunge, they're both chiropractors. They're some of my best friends. And He was expressing how he got into intermittent fasting. He was always the hangry guy. Nope, I just have black coffee in the morning and then I'm cool. I eat my lunch and I eat a little dinner if I want to, but then nope. And just learning to get that control and not feeling dependent on basically a drug, which is what sugar is.
Yes.
It's the insulin dependent fluctuations that are unhealthy for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. Gosh, we can talk about diet forever. We can stay here for another 3 hours.
I'm not an expert. I just know what I've experimented with myself.
Same here, right? And you probably listen to even more podcasts than I have. So we have done enough of our own experiments and reading and listening to people who are experts and played with it to adjust it to what we need for our lifestyle. And we pivot based on what we want to achieve as a goal, right? As you mentioned, like if you have a goal of gaining 10 pounds of muscle, then you need to eat more.
You gotta eat.
Just a steak a day, even is not going to get you there. So know your diet and align it with what your goals are. And if it's not working, you need to experiment and iterate.
I also do work 8 to 10 hours a day. So I got to be a little clear in my head for my patients, right?
So you have kind of the full day of people typically packed back to back. And you got to do physical exertion because that takes quite a bit of effort to reposition and maneuver.
It's hard manual labor.
Yes.
I'm not a pencil pusher.
Yeah. And for sure, the powerlifting and weightlifting and strength can come in handy, especially with like the larger people, right? Not to be sexist, but I'm above average female, I would say, when it comes to size and, overall mass, even just like a bone mass. And I always had a hard time finding a female chiropractor that could adjust me well, just because men on average have still more power, right? And so you are the only one who's like, come in and you just move me. And so I think even that power, right, and the strength that you have and you work out personally definitely helps you in your chiropractic care to be more effective.
Yeah, I mean, as a female, I have to tell you, I mean, we are smaller, we have smaller bones, less muscle mass generally, and we break down as chiropractors, we break down faster. PTs, nurses, etc., right? We break down because we are smaller.
One thing, actually, now that you reminded me, I wanted to go back and dive in a little bit more is weightlifting as we get older, especially women, because we tend to lose muscle mass faster than men at certain age. And so it becomes more and more important. So I actually became way more focused on even creating a time of the year where I more focus on the raw strength, so which is typically I align it to my tennis calendar, like in the fall, like September, October, before the winter. That's where most of our raw work was done. So I kind of align it as more of raw strength and building out more of that power that carries me throughout the year, because I don't lift perhaps as heavy throughout the rest of the year. But what is your suggestion in maybe protocol that you do now with weightlifting, and how much has it evolved or changed?
When I do weightlift, I also go back to my old routines. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time on a bicycle and running and swimming, but I always kept at least 1 or 2 days a week where I would weightlift because it's easy for me. It's easy. You don't have to think much about anything. Move some things around, right? Move some things around. And women should absolutely do that. After menopause, we lose our main anabolic hormone. We need to actually go in and stimulate that and maintain up the metabolism and I say, go get a DEXA scan. Go get a scan to see where's your muscle mass at. Try to improve it a little bit every decade and maintain at least your muscle mass. Or if you're not happy with your metabolism, well, it's up to you. Just boost it, build some muscle. You can do that at any age. Yeah. I've been in practice for 30 years. I see some of my people that have been with me since they were my age or younger than me now, right? They're in their 80s and 90s. And the people that keep moving, they're amazing, right? They keep lifting or doing some kind of resistance training. They keep doing their sports. I have a tennis player that is going to be participating in the Senior Olympics or Senior Olympics this year, right?
Amazing.
At 80 something, right? So it's really cool. It can be done, but everything changes as we get older, especially for women, but also men. We all need to maintain that muscle mass. Don't get soft.
Yeah.
It's not pretty.
I love it. And definitely, I've actually been cutting down on driving in my heart rate zone every day. Like I don't do every day the zone 5 workouts, going easy on myself if I'm tired. I may do like zone 2 airdyne or a rower and then add a little bit more of even actually adding powerlifting or weightlifting. That kind of is typically lower heart rate zone. So it can be good in the off days when you're torn out from vigorous activities. You mentioned you go to your go-to routine. What's your go-to routine for weightlifting? What do you typically do?
Ben, ryg, bicep, bryst, skulder, tricep.
What is it?
It's a 2-split in the gym, right? That's what we did back then. And it's always what I go back to because it's so easy. But it's chest, shoulders, and bicep, legs, back, and triceps, and then abs and calves interspersed all the time, right? But it's always easy to go back to that. But when I then split it out differently, I go do back and legs together, and then I do chest and shoulders, and then some arms here and there. And then 1 to 2 times a week. If I go to the gym, if you just get there, you're going to want to do something, right? So even on a day when you don't want to, just go over there.
Anything we didn't talk about that we should touch base on? Any recovery protocols you recommend that perhaps you have tested work really well, other than obviously the cold plunging, or that you recommend to athletes that you see that come to your office?
Don't get old. Don't get old. Something I often talk to people about. You come to me, and I'm not cheap. I am selective, and I put a lot of effort into every treatment, So if you want to save yourself the money, why don't you start with looking at your sleep, your hydration level, the quality of your food intake, your movement patterns, right? Meaning exercise, and then your social connections. Those 5 things. If you just dial that in a little bit, sleep can cure so many things, and a little sunlight. You start with that before you start spending a lot of money on massages and PT and chiropractic and all that. Have a little routine and dial in the most important things: sleep, diet, movement, hydration. And if you like people, you can have some social connections too.
I like it. How do you go about what a proper hydration should be? Do you have a simplified equation? Because you can go crazy if you start studying. It's like per body weight or...
I went into I would try it out. What's my sweat rate, right? So you go out on a bike ride for 2 hours, you pee first, you measure your urine, you measure everything, it goes in and out, you see your sweat rate, because everyone's different. But then comes in other factors that say, how salty is your sweat? How much sodium you're eliminating? But you can dial it into a certain degree you can heat train so that you are eliminating less sodium and less water with that. But there's so much to that, right? But you got to hydrate. And I can tell you, the first time I really saw what dehydration looks like, you were there because we were doing Half Dome. I came back the next day. I went straight into a phlebotomy lab. And I usually have big fat veins and I spill blood I'm the easiest person to draw blood on. And I had a headache for 2 days, right? So I am clearly dehydrated, right? And the blood comes out and it's literally black. I actually didn't realize it until I saw my blood thick coming out. That's dehydration, and it's for real, right? That is me being at altitude. And, I had it all dialed in. That hike we did for the whole day there, I dialed it in just with my food and everything, like I would a half Ironman triathlon, right? Okay, I know what I need, my weight, the temperature. I can dial in pretty much what my food's going to be and how much water. I had my little filter. I could get some more water, so it all worked out. But it's still high dehydration, right? But that's what it looked like. It was thick, very dark blood, and that is unhealthy. And I realized, if you are going a whole day and drinking caffeinated drinks all day and you're not getting at least 2 of these things right here, you're absolutely taxing your internal organs, your liver, kidney, and your filtration systems in your body. And that's just not good. So don't do it. You can also overhydrate, but not a lot of people do. I mean, you're going to pee a lot if you overhydrate. And then you can deplete yourself in different ways, but that is very hard to do. The kidneys have very amazing hormones to regulate that too.
So don't overthink. Keep it simple. On average, is it 2 liters? I still go in liters.
Yeah, exactly. I get up in the morning, I drink a glass of water, 6 ounces. That's what I do when I get up. And then I get in my cold plunge. I drink some more. Then it's coffee. So, and then I try to get these down. And when people, go to their eye doctors and talk about, oh, my eyes are burning all the time, and drink 16 ounces of water and see if that clears up a little bit. But it is amazing what you can do. Or the sluggishness, it may not be sugar. It may that you're simply dehydrated in the mid-afternoon, right? With your circadian rhythm. So it costs you nothing to drink a little bit more water and then work on your sleep habits.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any sleep tips?
No, I suck at it. I'm trying really hard, but I am not very good at it. But I get at least 7 to 8 hours, and it ruins sometimes my morning workout if I can't get my ass to bed at night. I don't watch a lot of television, but you got to get the Facebook and the Instagram turned off that phone and put it down and just let your mind calm down, right? You got to do that. And then slow it all down. But no, I'm not an expert on that. Still working on it.
Anything else before we close off that we should touch on? Anything you would want to encourage people from your expertise, seeing people who are suffering with different conditions or trying to improve their performance and continue to be active? Anything else you would recommend them to do either more of or less of?
I've been around this area for so long. I know a lot of the doctors that are around here, and I've had a lot of surgeries myself, right? I have a metal in my back and some replaced joints, right? I've seen a lot of doctors, not just as a clinician, but also as a patient. Whatever you end up doing, get a second opinion, or maybe even a third. Educate yourself. Doctors are just humans. They get sick and tired, and they have bad days too. Get second and third opinions, and then if you don't click with a doctor, don't go back, or chiropractor or whoever, right? You got to find people that will see the big picture. Another thing that really has come into the light here is that don't give up if you have something I see people with some exotic problems. I have no clue what it is, and everybody else gave up on them. I'm like, let's keep looking. We're going to send you to another expert. You don't know when you see a doctor that studies tidbits of things every day, that have seen exactly what you have before, that knows exactly what to do about it. Because we can't know everything, right? I study things every day. I go through case studies that come to my inbox every day, and I try to figure out what it is, even stuff that's not inside of my profession, because you never know when I could give some advice to a patient or a family member, right? But don't give up on doctors. They may be an expert in the field, but there may be something they haven't seen before. So keep asking and stay educated. All doctors hate patients that come in with a printout from Dr. Google, but I also like informed patients that have questions. So don't give up. If you have something weird, don't give up. And then when you get to my age where things start wearing out, don't wait too long before you go and have a joint replaced. You try everything, but when it's bone on bone, we don't know what to do about that other than replacing the joint. And it becomes a quality of life. You can do a lot of things with artificial joints if you stay strong and lift weights.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah. And so last but not least, where can people find you? If this conversation was interesting and they want to visit you, obviously, or they want to continue to follow you, what's the best way to stay connected?
You can go to my website, which is sometimes updated, but it's my first name, rikke.us. And do I have a big online presence? Not really, because I don't advertise. I would love to have a blog such as yours, but I don't have time. If you want to have a conversation, have a question, text me or send me an email. I will see that and just put in the subject line something that'll catch my attention.
Great. Last thing, you should pronounce your name in Danish. What's the right pronunciation?
Rikke.
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 It's awful. I've been practicing it for so many years. I can't get that the right way.
It's okay. I gave up on that a long time ago.
Well, thank you
for tolerating. When I was a young blonde doctor, the new patients would come in. That was before we had websites and all those kind of things. They would come in and like, oh, you're female. Because it was Rikke. They came to see Rikke Johansen. So that, okay.
Well, thank you so much for spending this amazing Thursday evening with me and talking about so many fun topics. I certainly enjoyed it, and hopefully the listeners will find it enjoyable and informative too.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Clara.
Thank you. And I'm coming over to cold plunge in your cold plunge.
Okay. Okay. So yeah.
Let me know
If
what
you
the
enjoyed
fee
this
is.
episode, I want to ask you to please do two things that would help me greatly. One, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform that you use to listen to this episode. Two, please share this podcast with a friend who you believe might enjoy it as well. It is a great way to remind someone you care about them by sharing a conversation they might be interested in. Thank you for listening.